and welcome to another review video. This time around, I'll be looking at the Disney collab, event. This is the first time we have gotten this collab, but we did get it a little bit late. In JP, Disney came right after Digimon, so this collab is about 2 months late in NA. It is a bit shocking that we're not getting a reskin version, since the licensing rights are probably very expensive, but this might be due to Gung-Ho being involved in the Disney Pixel RPG game. Maybe Gung-Ho getting these rights for us in NA is the reason why our server couldn't afford the rights for JJK. But seeing how our schedule has been all over the place recently, with a Marvel reskin earlier in December for example, maybe now we can't for sure write off JJK. I don't know. I don't want to give you guys any hope. I ultimately feel that we're still not getting JJK at all. Anyway, there are 25 units in the Disney REM and 2 machines that you can roll. The 6 Magic Stone REM includes all Disney units, but for 1 more Magic Stone, you can roll in the other machine that excludes all of the 5 stars from the lineup. In my opinion, those units are mostly useless, so if you're going to be doing any rolling, I would recommend the 7 Stone REM after you have gotten all of your free rolls. Maybe you'll get lucky and get the chase unit, Aurora. She is an amazing cleric. She has a 7.24 pull rate in the 7 Magic Stone REM and 4.25% in the 6 Stone machine. This cleric and looping shield can fit in various teams, but most notably, she is a key sub in Belle teams. So those of you that were lucky or rich enough to assemble that team will probably want to get this unit. Apart from Aurora, some other units are a little bit interesting, but most of them still feel pretty outdated. And this is taking into account the buffs that JP recently announced for 4 units to celebrate our late run. Many of the Disney Pixel units have fixed board active skills, which might come in handy for ranking dungeons. So even if you don't care about Aurora, you might want to do a few rolls for ranking purposes. Overall, I do think it's worthwhile to do a few rolls maybe, preferably on the 7 Stone machine after you have gotten the 8 free rolls from quests and stamps. But do keep in mind upcoming events like Valentine's, which will start in a few days later this month. Similar to Heroines, this REM will come with a Fever Dungeon, which basically gives you a free crown if you get enough points. There's also gonna be a set of quests, and among these is 1 free 6-star and above roll for scoring at least 50k points in 1 Fever Dungeon clear. By defeating the egg machines, you'll have a chance of getting some farmable units. But these aren't really that interesting, except for Mickey and Mimi, who can be used as trade fodder for the exchangeable A-star units. The drop rate is pretty low though, probably close to 1% or so, but this unit is essentially worth 7 Magic Stones. So if you want to try your luck, get ready to do a lot of clears. If this unit is your goal and you want to speed up the farming, auto-quit if you see the golden egg machine, since Mickey and Minnie can only drop from the regular egg machine. Don't even go for a high score and use actives to quickly clear the dungeon. There will also be server-wide rewards for reaching score milestones. These rewards include 2 free rolls, with one of them being at least 7 stars, which unfortunately sucks since Aurora is a 6-star unit. After a few days in JP, Gung-Ho added 3 more rewards, buffing 3 units, Genie, Pooh, and Maleficent. But we're gonna be getting these units fully buffed from the get-go, and probably won't have any additional server gold, since we already have a goal for the 20 rainbow medals that came with those 3 buffs. When it comes to the Sync Awakenings for the transforming Disney units, this time there isn't a limited time unit that you need to get to unlock it. All of these units will need a certain carbuncle, which are pretty easy to get from early normal and technical dungeons. Now onto the REM units. I'll start off with the 5 stars, which again, I honestly think are not worth it. Therefore, you should skip the 6 Stone REM. Also, none of the 5 stars can be used as straight fodder for the exchangeable Disney units. Huey, Dewey, and Louie, and Scrooge all have looping active skills, plus some other effect. In the case of the first unit, a looping time buff with an Awoken Pine Clear effect is not worth the team slot. Scrooge might have a bit more use in farming teams like Namiel, but outside of the auto heal active skill, he doesn't bring much else to the table, especially with those awakenings. These units' equips can't even be used to make some other 1-turn cooldown unit loop. Goofy and Pluto are also pretty lackluster in their base form, even when taking into account Pluto's 5 team HPs. Their equips at least have somewhat okay awakenings if you don't have a deep box. The Pixel Evos create these boards. I'm not entirely sure if Pluto's will ever be used, but at least with Goofy, you can set up this board. Daisy is the last 5-star unit, and she is as unremarkable as the previous ones. Her awakenings are a bit more useful, but the button and shield active skill is pretty mediocre, since 300k damage is almost nothing nowadays. The Pixel's bow-shaped board is also not that useful in my opinion. You could arrange the orbs into BDPs or rows, but I don't think the initial orb placement is that easy to work with. Minnie Mouse is a looping shield that does have some utility with her 4 Ls. The Evo trades 2 of these for a tape resist and more skill boost. So for some teams, she could be an okay option. And unlike the dogs, Minnie's cooldown is 1 turn shorter, so her equip could turn a 1 turn cooldown unit into a looping shield. Mimi also gives you a bow-shaped board but with light and fire orbs. Usually for ranking dungeons, if you're matching fire and light orbs, Fire Yogg is very hard to beat, since their fixed board active skill is usually better for rankings. Donald Duck's non-pixel forms do not have much use, mainly due to his active skill. It does loop, but it barely has any value. At the very least, this unit has a 10C equip with a Hilo E Awakening, which is a bit rare. It's not the worst, but I would recommend not max scaling, since again, the active skill is pretty bad. The Pixel Evo has a bow-shaped board, and as I mentioned, I'm not a big fan of these. Mickey Mouse has a lot of Evos, and some of these are somewhat interesting. The standalone, not so much, since he basically only gives you a looping recovery buff. All of the other Evos also have looping active skill. The Mini Duo handles attribute absorption. Pluto is a looping shield, and the ones with Donald Duck, Pierce, though the last few Evos only loop in Rainbow Team. Even though the active skills are somewhat interesting and last for a long time, I don't think Mickey will offer much value in actual teams, but in some swiping teams, these long-lasting effects could be somewhat useful. The Pixel Evo is an auto-healer and board expander like Christmas Celica, but has a higher cooldown in exchange for an enhanced Orb Skyfall buff. This unit doesn't have any utility though, and it doesn't really deal much damage either, so if you need an auto-healer, I would probably go with some other unit. Chip and Dale are a damage-oriented cleric that can also handle HP debuff, but due to that effect, their cooldown is slightly on the longer side at 6 turns. The active skill also gives a cap break for 1 turn to wood units, which unfortunately interferes with the best wood team at the moment, Eyes, so I doubt that this unit will actually see much use. The Pixel Evos are also not optimal, but if you're missing Lily Ruka and need an HP buffer, these two aren't too bad of a replacement, especially if you want those resist awakenings. The equip has 3 full resists, which is pretty rare, but those Wood Rose and Sub-Attribute Awakening make it broadly unappealing. Wood Row teams are not meta at the moment, but I could see this being used in a Freak team in the near future. So if you plan to get that unit, maybe keep a copy of Chip and Dale. Stitch is an exchangeable 7-star, but I really wouldn't bother exchanging for him. His cap break for devil types was increased from 7.5 billion to 9 billion, but I don't think this was significant enough, especially because the pool of water devils is very small. I can only think of Rimuru teams, and those teams do not really need any additional water orb generators, and they also don't need any cap breakers. Rimuru has been out of the meta for a while, and the current pure water team that is somewhat meta is Yamato, who again has plenty of better choices when it comes to orb generators, and also doesn't really need a cap breaker. Another strong water team is Mars, and again, if you have the optimal team, you already have 3 Mars that handle orb generation, and even if you don't, Stitch doesn't fit with the team since he will get rid of your light orb. Stitch is pretty much just a meme unit that you can use to reach a very high combo count. And this type of active skill is not even unique to Stitch, since you can attempt those really high combo counts with the farmable flower dragons. Even Pixel Stitch's fixed board is awkward for ranking dungeons. I only took a quick look, but all of the boards that I thought of with special matches were all missing an orb or 2 to make them work. I don't think his orb distribution is all that useful, but maybe I'm missing something. Do let me know if you can think of any good boards. Stitch's equip has pretty good awakenings. VDP plus another damage awakening is still a bit rare at the moment, and even though the active skill is on a low cooldown, it could come in handy in certain scenarios. Exchanging for Stitch is somewhat cheap since he can take 5 6-star GFEs, but since I can't really find that much use in both of his forms, I wouldn't consider this unit a high priority trade, and might only get one at most just for the equip. Both forms of Mickey and Friends are damage-centric clerics, but their 7-turn cooldown is relatively high when you compare it with other useful clerics. The Team White cap break and +7 combo effects do not seem particularly useful. The celebration form has a higher damage multiplier than the base form, but you will need to match a BDP and all attributes, which is very unrealistic. Honestly, I would rather use any other cleric, though the two forms' leader skills are relatively easy to activate. One downside is that it only gives you a raw HP boost, so you will need to pair them with the damage reduction leader to cope with gravity attacks. The Pixel Evo generates a board similar to Kaito. The resulting board can be swiped, and this will give you a heal L match plus 3 different attribute TPAs, which depending on the ranking can be a decent amount of style points. This unit is exchangeable, and while I find the non-pixel forms unimpressive, I might take a look at this exchange at the end of the collab since this could be used in a ranking. Cinderella is a looping time and roulette unit, but her roulette does not generate dark orbs, so I would not include her in a rainbow team at all, since there's a chance, especially if you're a bit careless, that her roulette might leave you unable to match a dark combo, and thus leave you unable to match 5 attributes. 4 attribute match teams are very awkward to use, since these miss out on activating the Guardbreak Awakening. More often than not, even if a unit only has 4 attribute match awakenings, you will still try to match 5 attributes, since they probably also have a Guardbreak Awakening, and missing out on the damage from voiding defense is just silly. You could put Cinderella in non-rainbow teams if you want the time buff and roulette. Her active skill also gives you an 8 billion cap break, but it only lasts for 1 turn, so you can't really rely on it for damage, and might even be detrimental to your team if you run some other cap breaker. One thing Cinderella has going for her is the fact that she is an easy leader to play with. She gives a good amount of bonus combos and FUA damage, and her leader skill activation is very easy to meet, especially with her roulette. Her Pixel Evo's fixed board allows you to match 2 BDPs and 4 other combos. I don't think I've seen this one being used in JP yet, but maybe one day. Marie has a lot of utility, but doesn't have an essential active skill, so you might not have space for her in a team. More often than not, you would rather run a looping shield instead of this unit, but if you only expect to face a few scattered big heads and have enough HP to tank all other heads, Marie can be a pretty decent sub. Pixel Marie's active skill isn't too impressive since it's a ribbon shape, but maybe you could actually use her as a leader in a Noah system to farm XP. The leader skill is somewhat similar to Academy Camilla's. You won't get as much experience from the leader skill and from missing out on Camilla's Dungeon Boost Awakenings, but you could try to recreate this all shoot at 3 team with Pixel Marie replacing Academy Camilla and Masamune replacing Lily Ruka. Marie's equip gives a good healing boost, and maybe the delayed 100% shield could be useful in a certain scenario, but it's probably going to be very tricky to find a practical application. Overall, I do think Marie has some uses, but these might be very niche, so I wouldn't consider her a high priority trade. Jasmine is a cleric meant to go in Genie Aladdin teams, though she unfortunately has to compete with Aurora. This unit does pack a lot of utility like Aurora, but Jasmine's looping recovery and +2 combo effects pale in comparison to the utility of a looping shield. Though for the newer super altitude dungeons, you might actually need that recovery buff, since neither Aladdin nor Genie's leader skill give a noticeable recovery buff. Jasmine also suffers from only having 4 heal OEs, which will mean including another recovery stick in the team to deal with the low recovery in super altitude dungeons. Jasmine Pixel Evo gives you a heart-shaped board, which is definitely better than the ribbon boards, but this specific one does not give you any heals. Depending on the ranking dungeon, Rose could be worth a lot of points. Since you're only matching Rose, you could just use Etemon's equip, which will not require you to move any orbs. Awakenings-wise, Jasmine's equip is not as good as Cotton's, since the others do give you 2 more other OEs. And the big shield from the active skill might be more desirable to tank a big hit than an HP buff, especially if the team has low recovery. But SN6 is coming very soon, and that dungeon boosts balance type HP, so this equip could work really well there. Pooh Pals is an exchangeable A-start unit, so this unit can only be traded for 12 this A units, including the farmable one from the Fever event. This is a key sub and leader if you plan to play with light and wood TPA teams, though keep in mind that these quickly fell out of fashion in JP. You are meant to loop their cap break effect with 2 copies of this unit, but 7.5 billion is a bit on the low side and pales in comparison with other cap breakers who only need 1 unit to loop like Evo Eyes. This unit has a decent leader skill and can tackle some of the endgame, but you'll probably struggle moving past SN4. This collab is late, so this leader has been power cropped already, and even though Gung-Ho did buff some Disney units, neither this nor the standalone Pooh received any buffs for NA's debut. Even though the equip active skill is mediocre, the awakenings work really well in SN6 Omni-Mon teams. That dungeon isn't that difficult, and you don't specifically need this equip, but if you end up with 12 useless Disney units, you might want to exchange for the equip to strengthen your Omni-Mon team. Or maybe you rolled one of this already and want to complete the team with a second copy of Pooh and Pal. Peter Pan and Captain Hook is also a unit that needs 2 copies to loop their effects. 2 of these will give a 45% looping shield, along with some other buffs to help out Peter Pan teams. This duo's damage is a bit on the low side, but this is because Peter Pan has a leader skill that scales damage with each TPA. Peter Pan also scales combos with each TPA, so at least I can forgive the fact that this unit doesn't add any additional combos. 10 million FUA damage is still okay, but I would have preferred if it had gotten buffed, since for some of the newer dungeons, having at least 15 million FUA lets you bypass or skip some undead animations. This unit's equip gives a lot of useful awakenings for TPA teams, in addition to 6 effective skill boosts. I don't think it's as useful as Pooh and Pal's equip, since this one doesn't grab a monster type awakening. So unless you care for Peter Pan teams, I would probably skip this unit and try to get the other one with my 12 useless Disney units. Peter Pan is exchangeable for 5 units, either 6-star GFEs or some high rarity Disney units. This unit is a leader that pairs with the previous unit. Peter Pan is a decent leader on paper since his leader skill is very solid, and having access to a looping 45% shield effect adds a lot of bulk, but that team is inflexible and pretty slow. 2 team slots will be devoted to the previous unit for the looping shield effect, and 2 more slots will be devoted to Peter Pan to loop his cap break and roulette active skill. This leaves you with 2 free slots for a cleric and a unit to pierce, void damage absorption, and or void attribute absorption. The cleric slot is pretty much required nowadays, and if you run attribute absorption latents, you could run someone like Silva or even Omni-Mon with the wood sub-attribute equip to deal with void shields and damage absorption shields. But running those attribute absorption latents means that you can easily be delayed in newer dungeons, since more than 2 skill delays are a bit more commonplace. The team is slow, since you will pretty much rely on a roulette for your orb generation. Peter Pan and Captain Hook do give you 1 set of TPAs for wood, water, and heal, but to actually deal damage in some of the newer dungeons, you will have to fish out more TPAs from Peter Pan's roulette. I would say that this team has more potential than Pooh's, but just like that one, I think this one will also struggle in dungeons released after SN4. Peter Pan's Pixel Evo has a unique board, but I have yet to see it being used. You could arrange it to match a wood Rho, a wood L, a water TPA, a water L, and a fire L. Again, very unique, but I don't think this has been used in any ranking in JP so far. Since Peter Pan is a cheap exchange, it might not be a bad idea to get one in preparation for a ranking dungeon. Obviously only do so if you have the means, and would be fine with this unit collecting dust in your monster box. Otherwise, I would only get this unit if you like this TPA team and are maybe missing a copy to complete the team. Belle is not a looping cap breaker or balance type, but she is close and could bring some decent utility, though a major downside is the fact that her pre-transformation cooldown is really high and she doesn't delay or haste on transformation. She might be too much of a headache to bring along, but some Rainbow teams could definitely make use of her. She is sometimes used in Genie teams to pierce and bring a roulette. A pierce effect is often not needed in Rainbow teams, but if the dungeon calls for more than 2 SDRs on your damage dealers and orb generators, i.e. Genie, you will want to bring someone like Belle along to deal with void damage shields. The roulette is also useful to counter hazard roulettes and fix horrible Genie boards. Since Genie gives you a random board, you might not have enough orbs to match TPAs to deal more damage, or you might not have enough heal orbs to counter RCB debuffs and thorns. Her Pixel Evil's board doesn't have a lot of value since Etemon's equip exists. That equip gives you light and dark rows already in place. Belle does give more dark orbs than light, but this probably won't matter much in rankings. I do consider Etemon's equip to be better, but I think even this one hasn't seen any use in JP, so I do doubt that there's any hope Pixel Belle will also be used. Pixel Beast doesn't give a fixed board, and instead it's just a piercer with a shield break effect. 25% pierce uptime is very low though, so unless you really want the shield break effect, I think you'll be better off looking for a different piercer. Belle has seen a little more use in her equip form, but not in the way you would expect. There have been some SN6 and old UN Rush clears with this equip as a sub. The equip's cooldown and haste effect allow you to loop the 80% shield in some specific teams. Depending on the setup, you'll want either 2 or 4 copies of this equip for some very funny and time-consuming clears. Even if you disregard those uses, this equip is still solid as it adds a good amount of bulk and gives a slight damage boost. The balance type awakening does make it useful in SN6. Thus, I would probably try to keep all my copies of Belle since the equip could come in pretty handy, either as an actual equip or a very funny sub. Maleficent is the patch unit and is exchangeable for 15 Disney units or purchasable for $30. She has an egg drop boosting leader skill that says on playing JP to farm Gate Sovereign, but this collab and unit are very late and you might have already done all your farming for that unit. This Dark and Fire combo leader would ideally want to run BDP equips so that you can save a team slot and not run a piercer. Maleficent is your orb generator, and devoting 3 units for that purpose doesn't leave a lot of room to deal with other mechanics. But if you were to go with that setup, then an issue you might face is that her active skill might not give you the needed orbs to deal significant damage and pierce void damage shields. Therefore, the team can be very sluggish. You don't have to run a BDP equip on Maleficent, and you could instead run an Omni Voider like Code Geass Anya to condense team slots. There is a better unit out there for this specific role, but unfortunately, we in NA do not have access to Ghetto from JJK. We're also missing Mei Mei and Sukuna, who are also sometimes used in Maleficent teams. This unit got buffed in NA and JP. She now breaks her cap to 10 billion up from 9, but without that JJK support, she won't be able to tackle dungeons past SN4, just like Pooh and Peter Pan teams. Maleficent's equip isn't that special either. You could overcharge it to tank a big hit, but with Metatron's equip is more accessible if you can afford to lose the skill boost and don't need the board change. Or if you do care about the skill boost, you could maybe use Rook as top hat. All this to say that I don't see much of a reason to exchange for this batch unit, since the base form and equip are not that strong and could be replaced. Even when it comes to full or close to full Disney teams, these aren't that strong and are already outdated for a dungeon like SN5. Ursula is a key sub for Yamato teams that can handle absorption shields plus other debuffs. Even though the cap break is for 1 turn on a 6-turn cooldown, this damage boost might be consequential in some dungeons. Ursula brings a good amount of damage to the whole team with her Raw Awakening. In a Yamato team, it should be easy to stack around 20 of these awakenings, and if you do get 20, you will get a 7x multiplier to water damage. Ursula by herself gets you almost halfway there, so don't underestimate these Raw Awakenings in your team. Pixel Ursula gives a similar board to Lucas, but with water orbs instead of fire. This type of board has seen some use, especially in JP's last ranking, though most of the teams that I've seen use Luca over Pixel Ursula. Ursula's equip is commonly used in Yamato and Namiel teams. The latter doesn't really care for the Tensei Awakening, but the haste, skill boost, and Raw Awakenings are key for faster and more efficient farming. So even if you don't care for Yamato teams, Ursula is not a bad unit to have for ranking or Namiel team. Ariel is the 2 cooldown orb generator that Yamato was waiting for. Nowadays, I rarely see Yamato being used in newer dungeons, but he seems to be hanging on in JP tier list at the moment. And with Ariel, he can have an easier time, since on top of generating orbs, Ariel also boosts recovery and can cap break your subs. The 6.5 billion cap break is pretty low though, and it does neuter your damage when running one Yamato as a sub, since Ariel will be overriding his 12.5 billion cap break. The typical team also usually includes Ursula, who cap breaks water units to 8 billion, so you have to keep in mind your active skill order, especially in dungeons where you need to meet certain damage thresholds, like in Old UN6, where you need to hit for at least 120 billion damage on the 14th floor. Pixel Ariel gives a heart-shaped board with heal orbs, so like I mentioned with other units, matching heal rows could be better for your style point score depending on the ranking. Her equip is pretty decent for water teams that reach high combo counts, and can get the full multiplier from those 7C awakenings. but this equip is not ideal on herself since base Ariel would rather have a levitate equip so that she can deal meaningful damage. If you have Yamato, then you should be happy that we finally have both Ariel and Ursula, as they will slightly revitalize that Digimon leader. Maybe it's a little too late for some of you, and you have moved on from Yamato to newer teams, so you might not feel too enticed to roll for these Disney units. Pooh is one of the 2 BGM units in this collab. The base form has an egg drop boosting leader skill, but like I mentioned with Maleficent, you might have done all the farming that you needed without this unit. Obviously this might be useful in the future, but I didn't even bother to farm Gate Sovereign with an egg drop boosting leader skill since doing it with Omnimon in co-op was a lot faster. Pooh synergizes with Pooh and Pal, but as I've mentioned, that team hasn't aged all that nicely. Light or balanced teams at the moment do not have good cap breakers other than Pooh and Pals. We might get better ones if we get a full Gundam reskin rerun, but by that point Pooh teams will be even more overshadowed by those newly introduced units. Post-transformation, Pooh has an active skill similar to Rimuru. He gives some orbs and auto-heals for a little bit, but the orb generation might leave you unable to reach this unit's full damage potential since you might overwrite your heal orbs and not have enough for a hard L. Even though you can run Pooh teams without them, Pooh is missing some support from JJK. So if you want to make his teams work, you'll be working with a smaller subpool. Pixel Pooh can be a decent XP farming leader, since we do have a couple of units that can create swipeable 2-like combo boards. The prime example that also comes with a dungeon boost is Alien Kitty. But on the other hand, there are a lot of teams out there that use base Celine and can farm XP more efficiently. Pixel Pooh's board is not special at all. It gives the same number of orbs, has a ribbon shape, and has the same awkward placement if you're going for rows. The main highlight for this BGM unit is their equip. This was used in various speedrunning teams for UN Rush due to its haste, long-lasting combo buff, and pretty much all of its awakenings. Generally speaking, outside of speedrunning, this equip is still really solid. Unlike with other equips from this collab, the Balance type Awakening will make these equips useful for SN6. This unit has 2 very lackluster forms and a pretty strong equip, but I don't think this is worth $30, so I would skip the bundle. And I definitely wouldn't chase this unit in the machine since most of the Disney units are also pretty lackluster. Aladdin is exchangeable for 12 Disney units, and he is Genie's best pairing. This unit brings some utility and damage to the table, and his fake smooth time leader skill lets you not worry about any time debuffs while giving ample time to match a full rainbow board. His active skill plays a crucial role to tackle absorptions while also dealing with negative or Skyfall. Usually the latter don't really matter that much, since a lot of time you are already stacking enough OEs to not mind that debuff. The targeted attack buff is also nice, though Genie has a small chance of tackling those debuffs with his random active skill. Obviously that's not reliable, so at least Aladdin can ensure a way to recover from that debuff. Aladdin's equip is very solid as it lets you stack OEs just like Halloween Paimon's equip. You are missing the team HPs and haste, but this equip actually sees some uses in really fast F91 teams to clear SN6. That unit might not make it to our server, but I could definitely see this equip being used elsewhere. This equip can be easily overcharged to tank various bosses' super assault hits, like in UN Rush or in SN6. Every endgame dungeon pretty much now has one of these big hits, so with a low cooldown equip such as this one, you could probably drop a few team HP awakenings if you can correctly plan for a dungeon. Aladdin's equip also has a balance type awakening, which will also help in SN6 since that dungeon boosts balance types. Disney had a bunch of low cooldown equips that either boost your HP or give you a shield, but Aladdin's is probably the better one due to its rainbow OEs and shield effect that does not require you to fully heal to take a hit. Therefore, even if you can't assemble a Genie team, you might want to exchange for this unit just for their equip alone. Genie is one of 2 BGM units, and he is a very strong rainbow leader. His leader skill boosts dungeon XP just like Taichi and Belle, but unlike those leaders, Genie's playstyle is a lot slower since his leader skill requires you to match 5 attributes. With this unit, you can tackle endgame dungeons like UN Rush, but again, this will be a much slower ordeal than pretty much swiping with Belle. Genie's post-transformation active skill has been buffed to break balance types to 10 billion, up from 7.5 billion. The 10 billion cap break puts Genie on par with Geno, but since this unit breaks all of your other balance type units, your damage output can be a lot higher than Geno's depending on your subs. Genie's active skill gives you a rainbow board plus a random effect, but since these are very unreliable, I wouldn't count on them to counter specific floors or debuffs. Sure, you could lock out and get a cleric effect when needed, but I would still run a dedicated cleric. One of the random effects that I dislike from Genie's active skill is the roulette generation. Usually these are great on rainbow teams, but if you run a dedicated looping roulette, Genie has a chance to interrupt those. And since Genie's active skill does not give you a set number of orbs, he could keep you aboard without at least 4 heal orbs. In super altitude dungeons, this could prove to be very deadly. Even though the chances of Genie only giving you 3 heal orbs is low, this would be something that will constantly bother me, especially as the dungeon progresses. Imagine making it all the way to the boss, tanking a huge hit, and then being unable to heal enough for the next hit. Pixel Genie can deal a good amount of damage and has a very useful active skill. Right now, he's the only one that gives a looping shield and time buff. There are other units like Sekka and Fire Kiori out there, but these only give you a momentary time buff. This Pixel unit also has an XP boosting leader skill, and even though the effective HP is low for today's standards at 4x, you can still tackle UN Rush when paired with base Genie. Again, matching Rainbow to farm XP is not the fastest endeavor, but Pixel Genie teams have the highest XP boost of any team that can tackle UN Rush, at least at the moment. Genie's equip is one of 2 levitate equips with a balanced type awakening. This one gives 5 effective skill boosts and has a dungeon boost, but as I have mentioned with other dungeon boost equips, I don't really think that these are too significant at the moment. The effective skill boost and damage boost from the levitate are all nice, but I really don't think that this equip is worth the $30 or the chase. Genie's other forms do have some uses like I mentioned, but maybe you already have a good leader to tackle endgame content and are not interested at all in XP farming with a rainbow leader. The Pixel Evo could be used in non-rainbow teams, but this unit is also competing with other looping shields like Stella and Aurora. So even though you might want the Evo's extra damage, your team might value those other units' utility way more. Aurora is the big chase for this collab. I think for the last few reviews, whenever I encounter a fire unit, I would bemoan the fact that we didn't have access to this cleric. But now, she has thankfully come to NA. Her pre-transformation active skill can allow you to transform units like Takaru or Fiamare, since those units require a set number of orbs on the board to transform. Post-transformation, Aurora is packed with utility, multiple heal OEs, team HPs, Ls, and an average cooldown cleric active skill that also grants a looping shield. The lower cooldown compared to other units with similar active skills like Halloween Chakil and Gopta means that it will be easier to time her cleric effect. You will still be required to know when to pop her active skill or the cleric effect, but once you have that down, you can treat this unit as your looping shield. As of recently, you only need the shield in some specific floors, so for a good chunk of the dungeon, you could forget about the looping shield effect. And if you purely look at Aurora as a cleric, her 5-turn cooldown is about average, but this is much better than Gopta's 7-turn cooldown. The only possible complaint I could have with Aurora is the fact that she only has 2 Ls. It's not a huge deal, but this does require you to do a little bit more work to recover assist, since this debuff lasts at least 4 turns most of the time. One other issue that you could have with this unit is her effect that increases the chances of getting more heals on the board. If your orb generators do not override any orb, all of those hearts could screw you over, as your ending board might not allow you to deal significant damage, or worse, be unable to activate your leader skill damage reduction. Those chances are very low, and most meta leaders that would run Aurora, like Omnimon, Belle, and Crowley, override most of the board or have outs to such scenarios with roulettes. I just wanted to try to find any problems with this unit, but as you can see, I'm pretty much reaching at straws. Aurora is simply a great unit. Her Pixel Evo is also one that I would consider slightly better than the other Pixels, since her active skill generates a board that I have actually seen being used in JP. Her equip is also pretty solid, and could be used in SN6 since it grants balanced type, plus a good amount of bulk, effective skill boost, and OEs. So all around, Aurora is an amazing sub with uses in a lot of teams that can tackle the latest endgame dungeon or can work in ranking teams due to her fixed board. She can only be obtained from the REM, but at the very least, she has a high pull rate, so hopefully you manage to get a copy. I've mentioned how Aurora is still widely used in various meta teams, and that will not be stopping anytime soon. Gundam introduced a lot of light units, and some of these teams are using Aurora. Since her pull rate is a bit high, I would wait for all of the free rolls in Disney and then decide whether or not you want to roll. That is, unless you want to chase some of the other units or want to amass trade fodder for some of the exchangeable ones. All of the 8 stars only take Disney fodder, but if you're crazy enough, you could farm the Freebear event for Mickey and Mimi to use as fodder. Do keep in mind the really low drop rate, and that this unit only drops from the non-golden gacha machine. Otherwise, if you're not willing to do all that farming, you will need fodder from the REM so that you can exchange for most of the key units in some of the Disney teams. Maleficent and Pooh Pals are missing some support from JJK. These teams can still work without that collab, but this is an unnecessary hurdle to jump through for already outdated teams. Peter Pan teams might have a slightly longer lifespan with his cap break being buffed to 9 billion, which along with a looping 45% shield make them a little bit more viable in in-game content. Be warned, fishing at orbs from Peter Pan's roulette will be a drag. Not to mention that you might already have a much better wood team with eyes. No idea if we'll get Haikyuu, but this unit from that collab seems like a much better replacement for Peter Pan and Captain Hook. This unit gives a lower looping shield, but it'll cut down a team slot. The FUA on this unit is also much more useful for newer in-game dungeons that require at least 15 million FUA. So I would really think twice about exchanging for any of the 8 stars. As a one-off trade, maybe consider Aladdin for his equip, which can be very useful in SN6. And maybe get 2 if you decide to go for a Genie team so that you don't have to keep changing in between forms. Out of the exchangeable 7 stars, nothing looks particularly that useful, except Peter Pan if you're willing to shell out a lot of fodder for the team. These 7 stars are cheaper since you can use 6-star GFEs, so do check them out and see if any of them interest you. Use your own discretion, but I will be skipping all of the 7 stars. When it comes to the bundle units, I also find it hard to justify buying any of them. Genie might have some value if you miss out on Taichi and Belle to farm you and rush. Or you could use the Pixel Evo as a decent looping shield, though you might not need it if you have someone like Chibi Stella or Aurora. Genie's equip has decent awakenings and a great nightcap skill, though I still feel like it's unnecessary and is something that you can live without. Pooh as a unit has a lot of issues, since Light and Wood TPA teams are missing some support, though Pooh's equip is a little more tempting than Genie's since it can be used in a lot of different teams and could be really useful for SN6. Still, I really don't think that this equip alone is worth the $30. Apart from Aurora, you could try to roll for Ariel and Ursula to improve your Yamato or Namiel teams. All of the other units have very niche uses, and therefore I wouldn't really try to chase them unless you have really concrete plans for them. I would keep my eye out for Belle since you could do some funny things with her equip, but I really wouldn't waste stones chasing after multiple copies. Unfortunately, this collab comes at a time where most people have used a lot of stones in GA Bunko or are saving for Valentine's or other future REMs. Valentine's will require a lot of rolling for fodder if you're after a B Noah and B Athena team. Exchanging for each unit will require a little bit more than 100 stones. Our Gundam Reskin and Haikyuu are the next collabs in the horizon for NA, but these have problems of their own. Judging by past Reskin collabs, we might not get a rerun, but if we go by the surprising Marvel rerun in December, we could get a full Reskin this time around, but it might not come in time. And when it comes to new collabs, like Haikyuu, we have no idea if these will ever make it to our server. To get the shiny new teams out of those 2 REMs, you will be required to roll a lot. So if you have any hopes of those coming to NA, you might want to prepare now and roll as little as possible in Disney. But before a possible Gundam rerun, we should be seeing a Gonho collab rerun. This one is not that much different from the last rerun, but you might also want to spend a lot of stones there if you're after Stella, since she's a really useful looping shield, or Crowley, since she's a strong leader and also has an amazing equip for SN6 and in general when it comes to Omnimon teams. I'm in the camp that is saving most of their stones for Valentine's, and is also hoping that we'll get a timely Gundam reskin, which will enable B Noah to basically swipe every dungeon in the game. Even if we miss out on Gundam, I still want to get a B Noah system for swiping a lot of content. And when it comes to Disney, I'll be hoping that one of my free rolls will bless me with an Aurora. But if that doesn't happen, I might roll the 7-stone REM a couple of times, like maybe a multi at most. My account already has Chibi Stella, so I'm not in a huge rush to get Aurora. She would be amazing to have, but unfortunately, I don't have a lot of stones at the moment to chase her in this very lackluster REM. What are your plans? Will you be skipping Disney, or are you excited about some of the units here? Let me know in the comments below. Thank you guys for watching. Please remember to like and subscribe if you enjoyed the video. And a special thanks go out to Anokor Panda, Breastfeeding Obama, and Dark Silencers for supporting the channel. I really appreciate it. I'll see you guys next time. Goodbye.